Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Cropper here with Onar, and we're going to be discussing the fact that every single species is gynocentric. Every sexually reproducing species. We better put that caveat.
Absolutely.
All right. Gynocentric, that's going to piss off every MGTOW person in the county and half the people in the next county, too. Every species is gynocentric. Now,
Yep.
First of all, we can notice that in humans, we have to be pretty gynocentric because there's plenty of men to do the man part. Total plenty. But there's just not enough women. Like, so many men want so much sex, but the women are busy. Either they're pregnant or they've got their kids. Or so why are we gynocentric? Can you put a few sentences on that?
Well, women are literally the bottleneck of reproduction. As you just said, you only need one man to fertilize hundreds of women. Like, one man can have hundreds of offspring with hundreds of different women. But one woman can't have hundreds of offspring with hundreds of different men. She has a very limited capacity for how many children she can have. And therefore, it's always the women or the females that's going to be the showstoppers. They are the ones that determine how many offspring there's going to be.
Now, to prove that women are more valuable then to our society, we could ask what would happen if 99% of the men died. The 1% of men would carry on. They would just impregnate the women. It'd be okay. But if 99% of the women died, the species would have to very slowly build back up over time.
It would be a disaster.
Yeah, so that's why we throw men away, but we don't throw women away.
Disposability is built into men or males in general to a much greater degree than women or females.
Name a couple ways men have disposability built in. You mean emotionally?
Yes, emotionally, we tend to be more courageous and willing to take more risks in war or at work or so forth. And as Karen Strawn has pointed out many times, she's like a men's activist, that at a time when society was inventing, or men was inventing stuff to make life easier for women, such as dishwasher and dryer and so forth, we still hadn't invented basic security, safety equipment for men working in coal mines and stuff like that.
So men have to do dirty, dangerous work, even today.
Risky, dirty, undesirable, yes.
Whereas 200 years ago, we tried to keep women safe, and even today, we still try to keep women safe. A woman, 200...
Women and children first, right?
Yeah, even 200 years ago, women were safer. They might have to work in a factory around fast-moving machinery or something. But even 200 years ago, we treated women with more care and safety than we treat male workers today, sending them up telephone poles or whatever.
Douglas Murray, in one of his recent interviews, says something very interesting. He says that women have an enormous power that no one talks about. A young woman with no skills whatsoever other than putting on nice makeup is able to make a well-educated man with lots of money, do lots of stupid things and takes enormous risks just to have sex with her. That's an enormous ability an enormous power. Now that's gynocentrism, because the entire psychological makeup of men is created in order to have access to the reproductive organs of women.
Now, to be fair, some men don't give a damn about the reproductive organs of women, but they don't have children, so the next generation's not going to worry about that type of man.
No.
Unless
the survivors, those who pass on their genes, only do so because they cared about passing on their genes, right?
Now, women set a pretty high bar to get access to their reproductive organs. You have to sweet talk them and give them flowers and show up at their house every day for months before you
Women
get
and
access.
children first.
Yeah.
Right.
So, since they put such a high bar on it, men have to be virtually obsessed with it to get access.
Yes, and that obsession is a psychological recognition in the back of the head that you're disposable.
And that unless you can get access to the magical
something horrible is going to happen.
Yeah, you're going to disappear. Your genes and your person is going to disappear into the sands of time unless you can get access to the magical vajayjay.
And that is also why ostracism, especially by women, is one of the most powerful mechanisms of power. Because if women say we don't want to, we disown you, then you're cut off from your future.
The Lysistrata comes to mind. The Lysistrata comes to mind.
Yeah.
The strikes.
And so we have to take that into account when we think about the psychological makeup. That the psychological makeup, not only of human males, but of males in general, regardless of species, structure their entire lives around getting access to women. And they are the ones who have to prove themselves.
Peacocks.
And yeah, sexual selection is literally women selecting which men get to pass on their genes, right? Or pass on their, on their genes.
Yeah. Men the male puts themselves out there and the women choose whether or not to accept.
Men fight it out, and this is a calculation. It's a calculation of which individuals are the best for the long haul.
Now, let's say one good word about Christianity here, because they saw the warfare this caused, small-scale warfare maybe, but they saw the tension in society this caused, and they invented this system of one man, one woman.
Actually, no, they can't take credit for that.
Well, fair enough. It's really old, but they institutionalized it in their religion the way that Islam, for example, doesn't.
Yes, and like the actual institution of monogamy is 2 million years old.
Right, and we see it in other species as well, and we also see that they aren't 100% true.
That's fine. That's okay. But like in terms of humans, like our closest living ancestors, the apes, they are not monogamous.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, they don't have a nuclear family. They have a tribe.
Yes, they're socialists. They're building their lives on the single mother, sexual promiscuity, living from hand to mouth like a hippie, and they don't produce things. They can pick up a branch and use tools here and now, but then they throw it away because they live in abundance in a natural welfare state where free food literally grows on trees.
Right.
And so they're promiscuous. So there are no fathers, only sperm donors. And so the males there fight each other for becoming the feudal king, the guy at the top of the harem.
The main sperm donor.
The main sperm donor. So there are other sperm donors, but he gets to get like 50% of the kids or 40% of the kids because he's the main donor like that. So that's what the men fight about in apes. But there's no connection between the male psyche and children in apes because they don't know their own children. But there is such a psychological connection in humans. Right,
and they do kill baby gorillas will kill baby apes, baby gorillas or whatever they're called.
Yeah, but no. Actually, they in even older monkeys they do that. But in gorillas and in chimps, women have developed a special technique for avoiding this, of confusing men. They're confusing fatherhood. So they're screwing everyone. So they can't tell who's the father. They're hiding paternity with sexual promiscuity.
Uh-huh. The more men they sleep with, the more men will be nice to them because they don't know if that's their kid or not.
Yep.
Uh-huh.
So the men have the males there. They protect the tribe because they don't have a family. They only have a statistical knowledge of who's their child. So they therefore spread their protection equally much to all. So they are collectivist in the true sense of the word, very tribal, ultimately tribal, because they don't even have a family unit.
Now we did promise to prove they were gynocentric.
Yes, they are gynocentric because they protect. It's still the males going out there protecting the tribe, right? And they're willing to die in battle, either against other males or against males from other tribes in order to get access to the females. The females are not killed. It's the men who die.
An interesting thing I read the other day was that the beta male in a baboon clan will sometimes do a suicide attack against a jaguar that's hunting the tribe's trying to get away, and this jaguar's hunting them, and a beta male will just go and attack, and it's clearly a suicide, and it gives time for the rest of the troop to get away. But the alpha male doesn't do it. The alpha male, who would seemingly have the best chance of winning a fight, and the beta male clearly no chance, and yet attacks.
Well, that is what I'm talking about, disposability. A beta male may know in their core being that they can actually never reproduce. And their only way of actually reproducing is to ensure that some of their siblings reproduce, at least.
So do something to help the group with whatever power you have available.
Now, it's not hard to see where collectivism comes from, right?
Yeah.
So we have a past that is very, it fits very well with collectivism, even though we have moved in an individualistic direction as human beings.
Well, individualism, we find, is our true metaphysical nature. However, the collective is the background against which we have come to exist. So it's like collectivism wouldn't be such a huge threat to mankind if there weren't such a propensity for it. There's a tremendous propensity for it, an emotional propensity for it.
Socialism comes from the apes, and we're still half monkeys, so to speak.
Yeah.
I think Ayn Rand talked about them as like missing links.
In her journals, she mentioned that, yeah.
Yeah. There are these people who are like half apes, halfway between us and the apes, and those are the collectivists.
Nice. Yeah. They're the group thinkers who can't think for themselves and won't discover individualism. They're stuck in the animal world. They're stuck in the animal world.
Yes, but in one sense, like, I'm not going to blame them for that because, I mean, evolution is an ongoing process and it takes time to perfect one type of existence, right? We've only been individualistic for 50,000 years or something like that. And it started 2 million years ago with the nuclear family. So it's been a really long process, but we still are mostly monkeys beneath that thin veneer of rationality and individuality. So individualism and reason is very young. So it's no wonder that there's all this propensity beneath that wants to come up. And it's very easy to turn a human being into a monkey.
Now,
the simplest way to do that is just to put them in a single mother family and let them have 3 bananas from the state.
right.
And then they're a monkey, right?
Stops all their virtues of individualism.
Yep.
In their tracks.
I would call that an epigenetic phenomenon, where if you treat humans as apes, they will mentally become apes.
That's touching.
I'm writing a book on that.
Oh, very good. What's it called?
Yeah, it's The Progressive Ape.
Nice.
And the nice thing about the title is that you can't tell from it whether who's the ape and who's the if it's a positive or a bad title. Just think about it. In the way I explained it now, it doesn't sound very good. But progressive, there are a lot of people who like the idea of being progressive, and we come from the apes. We are an ape in one sense, so the progressive ape.
Yeah.
So I like the title.
It's a clickbait title. You get people to pick it up and read it who were unsuspecting.
Yeah. But just add at the very end now to address the MGTOW. There might be some MGTOWs watching this even because of your Sandman shout out. This fits what we were talking about. The gynocentric society fits very well with MGTOW thought, except for one thing. It's that we've always been gynocentric. This is not something that's new. It's part of how we exist. So the big mistake that the MGTOW people do is a form of misintegration. Like when you create a concept, you have one in the many. You don't throw away the particulars, but you keep the underlying individuality, but you abstract some kind of higher properties from that. Whereas if you misintegrate, you throw away the particulars and you're only left with the floating abstraction, the one without the many. I'm not explaining this to you. I'm just saying in case someone didn't know that from before. Then what the MGTOW people have done is that they've abstracted out some essential properties of women. Women are it's a hypergamy thing, right? And the disposability of males, blah, 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 all of that. And they're right about that as a general abstraction. But you can't from that go down to the individual and say that because of this abstract quality, then all women this. Just like you can't say 97% of men are murderers, therefore all 97% of murderers are men, and therefore all men are murderers. Most men are not murderers, right? So just because you have an outlier, you can abstract some qualities where in outlier land you find a very dramatic statistical overrepresentation of something. Doesn't mean that you're free to just ignore the individual. So rather than creating like a Galt's Gulch of men going their own way, I think that a more reasonable approach is to say you have to be more critical about what women you have a relation with, but you shouldn't give up on women.
Well, part of what they got their panties in a bunch for, the MGTOW, is because women have legal power, actual, real legal. The government's on their side in every fight, all the way.
Yep, and therefore it's even more important to find a woman.
And they're saying that the women are corrupted by this power. Even if you find the right woman, she might turn in 5 years.
That may be true, but then that means that, okay, are there ways that you can act in your life so that you can prevent this from happening? Well, instead of actually not having a woman, is there another country or state you can go to where you can live in a proper relationship? Like, what would you want to give up? Living in a corrupt society or giving up women?
Yeah, hard choice, huh? What do you think?
I would not want to give up women, but I have no problems giving up a corrupt society.
Right. Well,
and to me, it's strange that they don't think like that.
What if it's the best society available to them?
That's not true. They can go to Singapore. There are many places that are very, very good to live in, and that don't have these draconian laws. America is actually quite unique in that respect. There are welfare states in the world that are better than America when it comes to this gynocentric system. So, for instance, in Scandinavia, you can't screw a man in the same way.
Now, we started out by saying that all species are gynocentric. So are we saying that these laws are okay then? Or
no, not the laws.
Right.
But it's okay that we have to acknowledge that at the core of humanity is going to be women. And we're sort of bystanders. We're standing by and making sure that this river of civilization flows at the center.
The men are the worker ants standing on the outside, making sure that the women get through safely.
And here's the thing. When life and society is organized properly, then we get tremendous meaning from that. We're feeling we're doing our job.
We're built
Saving
for that.
women and children, that's something that makes us tick. This is one of the reasons why you can destroy a man by taking away the possibility of having a woman or having children. Right?
Which is one of the reasons monogamy is so important to stable societies.
And why you now are seeing all these lousy incels who are depressed and in some cases suicidal and homicidal.
Yeah, because the women have been taken from them by false lesbianism and stuff.
Not just that, but also by the chads. You have these guys. They can afford to have the state pay for their bill, the women, and this means that they can go and behave like whores, right?
Yeah, that's right. So you can't get a woman because she's busy not having a man.
And she's been convinced by people that this is the right way to go about their lives, that this is somehow morally acceptable and normal behavior.
Yeah, single motherhood.
Now, I think that we should definitely argue why this shouldn't be so. But in the meantime, dropping out of relationships, I can understand why that works for some people, but there are plenty of good women in the world, and it's very easy to just look inside of a prison and see that there are only men there, and conclude that these men beings, they're very dangerous. And if you look at all the court cases with women, you see that, okay, there's a lot of bad women out there that are screwing over a lot of men. But hey, we're willing to go into war with risk of dying for women and children. We should be willing to go into a relationship with a woman with the risk of being screwed in court.
So on relative scale, it's not so bad that the women have an upper hand in divorces.
Well, I don't like the.
We should work to change it.
Okay, I like the way you framed it. Not so bad, in the large scheme of things. Although the large scheme of things is not really a good way of thinking of it. But realistically, we should be expected to go to war to protect our family. And if you're willing to do that in order to protect your family, that's very risky, right? Are you then not willing to go into a relationship?
Because you might lose half your money?
Yeah. I mean, half your money is a lot, but it's not your life.
Right.
Not your whole life.
Rest easy, MGTOW. At least they're not taking your life.
Precisely. You should be happy because you get to live.
But we should change these garbage laws. I mean, they're bad.
Of course. But in the meantime, what I would then advise the MGTOWs to do is to be more vigilant in their filtering of women. Test them out. Give tests to them. Find women who can empathize with men, right? And that understands that a man is fundamentally valuable.
Yeah, and good luck finding such a woman today, but they've got to be out there.
They are, and you might have to go to another country to find them.
I met a girl from Poland once. She was very different from Americans.
Now, notice that there are a lot of, you're generalizing with Americans. I would make it a very simple change here. Look at urban Americans versus rural Americans.
Yeah, huge difference there.
What about Christians versus secularists?
Yeah, probably a big difference there.
You see, if you're starting to hone in on certain groups, you're all of a sudden there's an abundance of good people to choose from.
Yeah, you would think so. Well,
so just being marrying someone who's grown up on a farm, that might be a good way to make sure that they're not psychopaths, right?
Well, that's a pretty small group of people, since 3% of Americans are farmers now.
That's true, but what I'm just sort of like putting a strong spin on it, just to make a point. It's like you can prune down the population and say there are some people that you are MGTOWing from. Like you're saying that you're choosing out most likely, if you're going into any kind of progressive liberal urban area, you're going to have to look very hard to find a good woman, because they're evil narcissists. Because that's what progressivism and abundance does to people.
Now, if MGTOW want a better culture, how are they going to make a better culture? Is that what they want? What's their real goal? Do they want a better culture, or are they just bitching and moaning?
MGTOWs, I think, just want to be happy in this life, and this is the best they can do. Go their own way, kind of thing. This might be a misreading on my part. But if they do that, if they actually just give up on women altogether, then they're sort of giving up on humanity.
Yeah, and
it's very dark.
And they hearken to Ayn Rand's philosophy of reason and objectivism. They actually do mention selfishness. That's what they say. They're about their own selfish, living their life happy instead of sacrificing their life to marriage. So it's kind of tragic. They've got the tools in their hands for a true happiness, correct society, and so on, the correct philosophy for living, and they're misinterpreting it a little bit. I mean, we should definitely realize, okay, maybe a wrap-up thought. Sorry, MGTOW, the world is gynocentric, no way around it, but take heart. You get your only meaning in life from playing your part in that. You can get meaning in life if you take part in that dance.
To quote Jordan Peterson, pick up your cross and carry it.
It's going to bother the objectivists. They don't want suffering to be the part of reality.
I understand. I just did something haram. I'm awfully sorry. I just like that idea that there are things in reality that are just the way they are. And not all of those things are likable. Just like when you explained how you had to do some very nasty chore with putting down a cat. There's just nothing nice about that at all. There's nothing pleasurable. And there's nothing joy to be got from that. Just chore and nasty cleanup. Yeah. But sometimes you need to do nasty things to make room for a good life.
And you're telling the MGTOWists that marriage is one of those things?
No, that was marriage can be very good. But the gynocentrism
is just a fact.
It's a fact of life, and sometimes it's very bad. But your brain has been programmed to actually enjoy and get lots of meaning from living in a gynocentric society.
Yeah, you like to look at pretty women, and you like to look at pictures of pretty women, and you like to look at them when they pass you on the street. I mean, our whole brain is gynocentric.
Yes, not only that's one way. The other way is that we are readily making ourselves disposable like that in war just to save some women and children at home.
Yeah. And we make ourselves ready if a woman needs something. There's always 5 men there to help her.
We're always white knighting.
Yeah.
And we enjoy it. It's not something we just do because, it's a chore. Our psychology is made for that.
Strokes our ego.
That's right. And it's done on purpose, so to speak, by natural selection. It's not purpose, but because that implies consciousness, but it's natural selection has honed our psychology in that way so that we get pleasure from helping out maids in need.
Yeah.
Maidens in need.
Yeah, we have an inbuilt biological trigger to treat women as helpless children.
Yeah, and notice here that some feminists today are very angry about that, but they completely miss out on the fact that this is actually something that women do automatically. Karen Strawn has said this, and I won't credit her for bringing my attention to it, is that women self-objectify. Women turn themselves into helpless creatures so as to appeal to men's sense of empathy.
Well, that's what makeup and jewelry is. That's what
Partly,
makeup's
but
all...
No, that just makes them attractive.
Yeah, well, it makes them look like... It makes them look helpless and like they need a protective agent.
I don't know. I'm not sure about that, because there's things that are very beautiful, and like a painting that's makeup on things that doesn't look fragile.
If you saw a Van Gogh, a painting, out on the sidewalk, you're walking down the sidewalk, you'd see a Van Gogh and you'd say, this is not appropriate to have this out in the open like this. This needs to be protected and taken care of. And when you see...
Yeah, no. I don't like that comparison, because now you're literally putting it into the street like that.
Okay, it's a woman who's alone at the bar dressed up, and you look at her and you think, this situation's not stable. She either needs a man with her, or she needs to be...
But it's not the makeup that makes it like that.
Doesn't it give her more value?
It gives her more value, but I think that the makeup is there to make her look pretty, pretending that she's young. So to the point that young people are fragile, then there is an element of that. I agree. But listen to this. If you listen to the voice of apes, a male and a female chimp, can you tell the difference between them?
I don't know. Can you not? Probably not.
You can probably tell a little bit, but they're very similar. Both
they?
are shrieks, right?
I know that,
now,
like cows, I grew up on a farm, and if, like, maybe the bull is a little bit deeper of a bellow, but they all just bellow like cows. It's not like males and females with radically different voices.
That's right. Now, when did the radically different voice evolve?
Do we know that? Do we have a clue?
We don't know it, but we have a clue.
What's our clue?
2 million years ago.
Well, why do we think that?
Monogamy. And what happened when we had monogamy? For the first time, first of all, women's sexual power was contained within a relationship. So you could say that this was now tilting towards what feminists today would call patriarchy, right? So now you have a slight power imbalance. But at the same time, men for the first time in their life now knew who their children was. They became empathetic to their children, their own children. So they want to take care of these vulnerable little children. And children have always pretended to be fragile. They cry and all of this stuff, so that we should take care of them.
Yeah.
And a little boy can get away with being fragile until he hits puberty. When his voice shifts or breaks, he can never ever again say, it's so pain. He can never whine. That just sounds so unmanly. It sounds horrible. It's awful. Any man who does that is below a beta man, right?
Yeah. No.
And so what happens is that women don't shift their voice. They still are closer to children in their voice. They're not sounding quite like children, but it's not very far. The distance between a child and a woman is not so great as between a man and a child.
Now, some women do sound like a 9-year-old boy. I mean, some women sound like a 9-year-old.
And if you listen to how the Japanese girls want to speak, they're literally trying to sound as childlike as possible.
And when a girl gets a crush on you, she does act like that too. She sounds childlike, and I've heard even 55-year-old women who get into a crush with a man and are going on dates start acting stupid and flirty and dumb like that.
Yes, with a high-pitched voice.
With a high-pitched voice, yeah.
This kind of thing. And this made-up voice, first of all, they have their biology allowing them to sound like that. But what does this signal to the man?
Youth and vulnerability.
Child.
Child, yeah, a child. Protect.
Protect. It's an object. Must protect object.
Vulnerable object.
Vulnerable object.
Yeah.
So women, not by their own choice, but by natural selection, have evolved a physique that makes them look childlike to some degree.
Mm-hmm. Especially, we could say the most successful ones and the most valuable physiologically to men are the most childlike.
And so notice there are two visible markers that men don't have.
Women have two visible markers, their left boob and their right boob?
No. I'm talking about something that makes them look more childlike. We have facial hair and very often body hair.
Uh-huh, yeah.
Women do not. As do children also not.
Right. Now, I had put that down to the fact that men had to go out and about, and women stayed close to the camp or the fire or whatever and did much less strenuous stuff. But we can have that as well as the effect. We can have multiple effects working in that direction.
It doesn't have to be just one story. And so the point here is that women have pretended, and I'm not saying pretended in brackets here, in scare quotes, to be children, so that men who have newly evolved 2 million years ago, empathy for children, their own children, are now starting to treat women as children by protecting them. So if there was a power imbalance between men and women when monogamy arose, patriarchy, blah, 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 where women had to be forced into marriage, women more than compensated for that by self-objectifying, by utilizing the newly evolved empathy for children in men to pretend that they were childlike and therefore needed protection. Women can therefore get away with whining to a much greater degree than men can.
Yeah, they are still able to.
Men are not.
And it's not considered...
The very moment your voice goes deep, whining is over.
So fear and crying and vulnerability are not considered unwomanly.
That's right. That's right. Because they're childlike.
Yeah. Well, there
and
we go.
That's okay for a woman. Now, many people are going to freak out a little bit. Like, are men turned on by children? Is this like a pedo fantasy or something like that?
Oh, I didn't make that connection, but fair enough. I think they will. Someone will see that.
It's actually the opposite. It's the like I try to figure this out in my mind, and I'm writing about this also in the Progressive Ape. That it's the exact opposite of having a fetish for children. It's a fetish for adults. So men are when you only have visible pictures, visual cues to go from. A man only looks at physical attributes for when a woman is ready to be banged. Right?
Yeah.
So therefore, a woman, once she needs to grow boobs to say, now I'm ready, right?
Yeah.
Once that happened and the hip ratio, blah, 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 all that, now this is visually selling, okay, this is an adult woman, go ahead. Right. But the very moment we started to develop conceptual consciousness, we had a non-visible, an invisible marker that is sexy. Intelligence and being a conceptual being. And that is communicated not by visual means, but by speaking and showing through actions and through how you speak, that you have intelligence and that you have ability to think rationally.
Now, if most of these women are of fairly average intelligence, then they might not be able to showcase that particular talent, and they'll have to fall back slightly on their pretty eyes and their soft hair.
True, but now we have a mechanism for how this childlike woman evolved.
Right, as a way to, okay, she is childlike to get the protectiveness, and she grows the breasts to signal her difference.
Readiness to copulate, right?
Yeah.
So now consider the following: apes, chimps, they mature into puberty at around age 7. So a 7-year-old chimp is ready for copulation, roughly. So suppose now, our ancestors were at some point at that point. But we go into like a very strange period where we're extending childhood and waiting 5 years before we enter puberty. So we have 5 to 8 years where we are in this suspended state of just growing and being childlike and not entering puberty. That must have evolved somehow. How did that evolve? Well, suppose you have this 7-year-old ape and you have this 8-year-old ape. And this 8-year-old ape enters puberty at age 8, and the other one enters the puberty at age 7. Now, the male doesn't know the clock or the calendar, so all he sees is 2 individuals both entering puberty. He doesn't know that one is 8 and the other is 7. But what he notices is that the 8-year-old is more intelligent, speaks more intelligently, and behaves more maturely. And because he is a conceptual being at this time, starting to pick up on non-visual cues, he gets more attracted to the 8-year-old than to the 7-year-old. And then this 8-year-old, now woman, it's not a girl, it's a woman, she has more success in having offspring because all the guys want to have children with girls like her. So now more offspring are more women are born that enter puberty at age 8. And now we're back to the level field. So now we've raised the average age of puberty from 7 to 8.
And now you start with an 8 and a 9-year-old, and the 9-year-old is...
And so forth. And now we're up to like somewhere between 12 and 15. So that's an adult fetish. We are valuing adulthood to the degree that we're delaying puberty.
Yeah, so we must be... It's getting pushed higher and higher.
And we're doing that to create bigger brains, to create more intelligent and rational beings.
More complicated behaviors.
Yes.
More complicated culture. It takes more time to
cultivate.
To put our culture into our child before the child goes out and practices it.
Yep. So this is when I say adult fetish, I can translate that into reason fetish. Mm-hmm. We have a fetish for reason, and therefore this is going to have an evolutionary pressure in the long run for delaying puberty.
Right. Interesting.
Therefore, we have a process in evolution called, what's it called? Juvenilization. It's like we're looking more and more like our juvenile versions. So if you look at a human being, we look more like a baby chimp than an adult chimp.
Yeah, huh. Even a 50-year-old man looks more
neoteny is another term for it. We're delaying development to the degree that we're looking more and more childlike.
Now, our house cats or our house dogs are very childlike. They're in a state of suspended pubescence. They're just entering puberty. That's all they ever do. If they ever cross over... Right. If they ever become real mature adult dogs, they would be a wolf, and we would kick them out of the house.
That's right.
So
neoteny in this case is selected for by us humans through breeding.
Yeah.
But this is true for all domesticated animals. The way we domesticate is that we select for neoteny, the most childlike version. We see this with the cows. The most bred cows are the ones that lose the horns, like the child version of the cow.
And in Texas, where they let the cows just go out and do as they please, they end up with some pretty long-horn varieties.
Yep. So my point here is that we have over 2 million years had a selective pressure upwards for delay puberty. And this has contributed strongly to making us big-brained.
And culturally sophisticated.
And as to the degree that selection is ongoing for a reason, we're keeping on pushing the delaying of that. And we can actually see a little bit of that today. Who is it that are selected for being a supermodel?
Childlike?
Yeah, like you have 21-year-old women that look like they're 16.
Yeah. Big eyes, really
long legs,
big eyes, long
all of
legs,
that.
skinny.
Yeah. So they look like they're 16.
Like nothing.
Or 15.
They're nothing but knees and elbows is the same.
Yeah. Which is exactly how women look like at the point when they enter puberty, peak fertility, right?
Right.
So actually, when they say, "Oh, the supermodels, no one is like that," yes, a few people are like that, and if they were preferred over a long period of time, the whole human race would look like supermodels.
Well, the problem there is all women reproduce. We may value the supermodels most in whatever way, but all women get to reproduce.
I understand that, but my point is that here you see an inkling of how that mechanism works. Like if there was actually a selective pressure where those supermodels had more children, and those who they outcompeted the other ones, then you would see a slow drift upward.
In the age of pubescence.
Yes, and people would look younger and younger for a longer time. Now notice that the children of women who look younger make men who also look younger.
Right. So the successful women are going to make young-looking men.
And how did men compensate for that? By having a lower voice.
And facial hair to hide our face, too.
Yes. So to make sure that we have, even though we look like a baby chimp, at least we look a little bit manly with our facial hair and our booming voice.
Yeah.
So we have a much lower voice than even the chimps. So that's an indexical symbol. We've talked about this before. What does low voice mean? Big booming voice. It means it's something deep and big and booming and dark.
Well, I'll tell you what, it can be heard more easily. And I know this from my dad, who's slightly deaf. He can't hear females because they have a narrower band that they speak in. And if you can't hear those frequencies, then you can't hear them. Males speak across a broader band, and it's easier to hear. So I can imagine out in the wild, males trying to communicate with each other would need to have a voice that can carry, as we say.
Indeed, and that's another one of those things that just make this a very useful thing to select for. So when one property is propagated, it's a basket of good things that are pushing in one direction.
Yeah.
So it's not an exhaustive explanation when I'm talking about this in terms of sexual selection.
But it's a series of forces, like a storm system moves in a certain way, not as one force, but as a series of things.
But the huge difference between men and women in the voice, that is sexually selected.
Interesting. I had never thought of the difference in voices much.
Because one of the things that evolutionists noted is that the difference between men and women are dramatically reduced 2 million years ago, physically. This is one of the reasons they know that this is when monogamy arose.
We were physically similar.
We became more physically similar. Men became weaker.
I was going to say, I thought we were physically very different back then.
No. Back then we were very different, but then at 2 million years ago, zoom, the difference between males and females dramatically reduced. We became more similar.
It used to be the case more like peacocks and peahens. Peahens are very small little things.
This is called sexual dimorphism. Difference in between the sexes. So sexual dimorphism was reduced 2 million years ago. And what this means is the evolutionists then did what they always do. They asked, why are they different? Why do men have muscles? Well, in apes, males have muscles mostly to fight other males for access to women.
Right.
They have feudalism. They have a feudal king that gets to bang most females.
They don't use their muscles for food gathering or production. I mean, the females do food gathering and so on as well, and they have less muscle. So the muscle is for something else.
Yep, and it's infighting between males. And not only for infighting, but it's also to protect the tribe, right?
Yeah.
So the reason that the most likely reason that you get this reduced sexual dimorphism is that men stopped fighting about women.
Men stopped fighting about women because monogamy. Okay, that's right. That's how you tie the monogamy in. Interesting. All right. Well, have we left the original MGTOW topic? Let's see. Oh, gynocentrism.
No. Actually, no.
Can we tie that to gynocentrism?
Yeah, absolutely. Because you can say that men carved out their patriarchy through feudalism, there was one feudal king who had the harem. In apes, the ape king is also the feudal king who has the harem. And they replaced it with a more egalitarian form of monogamy. In one sense, you can think of it as a form of sexual socialism, and at the same time, you can think of it as a form of privatization of sex.
Instead of having the government have all the sex,
Feudal licking, yeah.
Yeah, we privatize it and everybody gets a piece of sex.
But it was egalitarian, so in one sense you can argue that it looks a little bit like socialism. Everyone gets their own woman.
Yeah. Well,
so that I think that this is one of the reasons that liberals so easily become incised with socialism. That liberals are they can easily convert to socialism, because the egalitarianism built into a private property, in this case monogamy, can easily be fit into a system of making sure that everyone has an equal access to this private property in form of the redistribution of wealth. And in that sense, monogamy may have started out as a redistribution of sexual wealth.
Yeah.
So you see you can see how these two are intertwined when you look back to that event 2 million years ago, which is interesting. So what my point is that when men gain that upper hand for a little minute with sexual redistribution, redistribution of sexual wealth, women retaliated by self-objectifying, by looking like children, by not having beards, and by maintaining their high-pitched voices, and looking fragile, and can put on these doe eyes, like, oh my goodness.
Lost a painting.
So you see, my point is only that the fragility is not from the makeup. The makeup can make you look younger, and in that sense, if they want to look like teenagers, and to that degree that they are looking younger. So it's a way of tricking men into believing that they are actually 16 years old.
Yeah, at peak fertility.
Yeah.
And not yet saddled with a child from another man available.
Right. But that's the main purpose or function of makeup. The fragility is built into their very core of their being, that they have lost lots of muscle mass. Look at them compared to the muscle mass of apes, of ape chimpanzees, much more fragile looking, and it's on purpose.
Even we are. I mean, compared to a male monkey of any kind, monkeys are ripped.
Yeah, we're pathetic.
Yeah, we're pathetic.
Yeah. So they look more fragile, and it's partly done on purpose, in scare quotes, by natural selection, to give them matriarchal power over men.
So
now, just like we're focusing on taking care of children, because now we know who our children are, which we learned 2 million years ago because of monogamy, that same mechanism has been hijacked by women to make us take care of them too, as if they're children. They're self-objectifying, making themselves into helpless creatures. And now we have feminists screaming at us for objectifying women, which was done by natural selection, for us to take care of women.
And once in a while you hear a feminist saying, "Why do you treat women like children?" Now we know why.
Yes.
Because they've gone through so many efforts to look like them.
Yep. And notice that this must not be confused with attraction, sexual attraction to children or something like that.
Right.
When we became upright, look at the boobs in apes. They look pathetic. They only have large boobs when they have children. This is permanent in women, that they have big boobs.
Yeah, that's right. Almost every species becomes enlarged only when they're nursing. Pigs, cows, virtually everything. I mean, we got milk cows, but those are a retarded invention.
So now, because we're standing upright, having a sexual signal becomes even more important now that they look more childlike.
And thus the obsession with boobs. The obsession with boobs.
Yes. Now, so the boobs don't shrink after birth, or like they grow regardless of having children, precisely because this is now the visual signal to men that this is not a child.
Yeah.
This is now ready for banging.
I have heard that in some women they deflate like pancakes after the second or third kid, so maybe that's a signal that this one's used up or something. I don't know. I'm terrible.
But there's some truth to that, and the reason then is that by that time, the man has now got a connection to this woman. He's married to her.
Yeah.
And they have children together.
She doesn't need to signal anymore.
Nope.
Yeah. Well,
I think we made the point here.
Gynocentrism is here to stay. Gynocentrism is the center of evolution for a couple million years now. So we can. So they shouldn't be so mad about gynocentrism. They should be mad about the laws. There should be a legalistic movement about the unfairness of divorce law. There should not be a MGTOW movement. There should be a divorce reform law movement.
And in fact, I would argue that this should now be entered into the economic freedom index, of Heritage Economic Freedom Index.
Good idea. So depending on whether or not you can get a fair divorce, would edge you up higher on the economic freedom, or lower, whichever it is.
Because it is a real economic risk. This is one of the greatest risks in society with divorce. Average divorce in America costs $50,000. Now that's a huge cost. That just goes to feeding lawyers, not the actual alimony or something like that.
Yeah.
Talking about just feeding the lawyers. So the cost of the legal system, and then is a measure like how much of the GDP does lawyers run away with. Ideally, they should get zero, right? Because they're actually just making sure that things work.
No, they should get something.
No, what I mean is, in an ideal society, you don't need lawyers. You don't need the law, right?
Oh, okay. That's a little strange, but I'll give it for the sake of argument. Okay.
So, we want to approach a society that government is just invisible.
All right.
Right? We don't notice government in a well-functioning society, because then it's doing its job of just keeping the sort of peace light on.
Yeah.
That's the only thing it does. And in that society, you don't need really much lawyers because things are just flowing smoothly. It's a well-oiled society. So I'm not saying that anything that a lawyer does is bad. I'm just saying that it approaches zero. The better a society is, the lower the cost of lawyers are.
Well, that's an interesting thought. I've done a video where I said a sophisticated capitalist society would have a lot more laws than a socialist society.
Yeah. Now we should definitely have a talk on that. Because because much of that's a very interesting discussion, because we may not need more lawyers for that.
Okay, true, fair enough. All right, but let's draw a line here with MGTOW, shall we?
All right, let's do that.
There we are. All right.